Mexican cartels construct an elaborate tunnel network beneath the US-Mexico border, smuggling drugs, weapons, and people with unprecedented efficiency. When former Navy SEALs discover the operation's true scale, they launch a desperate mission to stop a threat that the government can barely comprehend. Twilight paints crimson slashes across the Sonoran Desert as a lone Border Patrol UTV crawls along a dusty service road near Nogales. The metal border fence stretches like a rusted scar across the landscape, cutting through hills and valleys with mechanical indifference. Inside the vehicle, Agent Marco Vega adjusts his night vision goggles, the green glow illuminating his weathered face. 8 years on the border had taught him to read this desert like a book. Tonight, something feels wrong. Base, this is Unit 17. I'm at Checkpoint Echo. All quiet, but... Marco hesitates, unsure how to explain the prickling sensation at the back of his neck. The radio crackles. Unit 17 confirms status. Just a feeling, sir. I'm going to check the arroyo. Marco turns the vehicle toward a dry creek bed, its banks studded with mesquite and palo verde. The UTV's headlights sweep across the terrain, catching nothing but shadows and scrub. He kills the engine and listens. The desert at dusk is never truly silent. Creatures stir, wind whispers through the brush. But tonight there's a strange emptiness. He steps out, boots crunching on gravel. His handheld thermal scanner shows no significant heat signatures, but Marco notices something odd. The temperature reading for the ground beneath his feet is higher than the surrounding terrain, and not by a natural gradient. As he crouches to examine the soil, the ground trembles, barely perceptible at first, then unmistakable. The water bottle in his cup holder ripples, concentric circles spreading outward. What the hell? Marco snatches his radio. Base, I've got seismic activity at my position. The ground is literally vibrating. Earthquake alert system shows nothing, Vega. Are you sure? Marco never hears the rest. The earth beneath him shifts violently, sand and rock collapsing in a widening circle. He scrambles backward as the sinkhole forms, swallowing the front of his UTV in seconds. Base! The ground is... Static overwhelms his transmission as the vehicle tilts forward, the hood disappearing into darkness. 20 miles away, Commander Jack Reeves bolts upright in his chair, coffee splashing across maintenance reports. The former Navy SEAL now heads Border Tactical Response, a specialized unit comprised mostly of veterans. The late-night call from Border Patrol sets his pulse racing. Say again? Sinkhole took out a patrol vehicle. Any casualties? Agent's alive, but shaken. Says there's something unusual about the collapse, not natural formation. Coordinates? Jack scribbles them down. I'll have a team there in 30. He punches in a number on his secure line. Torres, grab Weiss and Harlow. We've got a situation. Jack's weathered F-250 tears across the desert, tires spitting gravel. His lined face tightens as he drives, night vision goggles revealing the landscape rushing past in ghostly green. The border fence is an ever-present silhouette to his left. 3 tours in Afghanistan hunting Taliban tunnel networks had taught him one crucial lesson. The enemy always adapts. Build a fence, they go under it. He arrives at chaos. Emergency lights paint the scene in strobing reds and blues. Border Patrol has established a perimeter around a crater in the earth. The UTV's rear end juts from the hole, its frame twisted. Like a broken toy, Jack strides through the crowd, his Border Tactical Response badge clearing a path. His eyes scan for the agent. Vega, the report said. Where's the officer who was on scene? His voice cuts through the noise. A supervisor points to a nearby ambulance. Over there, pretty rattled but walking. Jack doesn't wait for more. He moves toward the ambulance, but something catches his eye at the edge of the sinkhole. Movement. Where there should be none. A desert rattlesnake slithers from the broken earth, scales reflecting the emergency lights. An agent draws his weapon, but Jack raises his hand. Hold up. The snake's pattern is wrong, too precise, its movement mechanical rather than fluid. Jack crouches, studying it. The rattler pauses, its head pivoting toward him with unnatural precision. That's no ordinary snake, Jack murmurs. He lunges forward, grabbing the creature behind its head. It writhes in his grip, then goes oddly rigid. Jack turns it over, revealing a compartment in its underside containing a sophisticated miniature camera and transmitter. They're watching us, he says, holding up the robotic surveillance device for the Border Patrol agents to see. A paramedic approaches. Sir, Agent Vega is asking for you specifically. Says he knows you from somewhere. Inside the ambulance, Marco. Vega sits on a gurney, oxygen mask fogging with each breath. Dust coats his uniform and face, except for clean tracks left by sweat or tears. Recognition flashes in his eyes when Jack enters. Commander Reeves, didn't know you were working border now. His voice is hoarse. Jack studies the younger man. Kabul, 2018. You were Marine Force Recon attached to our SEAL unit. Yes, sir. The tunnel clearing operation in the mountains. Small world. What happened out there tonight, Vega? Marco leans forward, lowering his voice. I saw something when the ground gave way, before my vehicle tipped in. There were lights down there, sir, and I heard voices. They knew I was up top. Scattered like cockroaches when the roof started coming down. You're saying this wasn't just a natural collapse or an old smuggling tunnel? No, sir. This was engineered. Large scale. I caught a glimpse of what looked like rail tracks before everything went dark. Jack's expression hardens. Rail tracks, you sure? Positive. Like a mining operation, but it wasn't old. This was new construction. Anything else? Marco hesitates. Just before I blacked out, I saw a symbol painted on a concrete support. A red scorpion wrapped around a drill bit. Jack's blood runs cold. La Alacran, the Scorpion. One of Mexico's most ruthless cartel enforcers, known for engineering expertise and sadistic executions involving scorpions. Intelligence had him killed in a raid 3 years ago. Jack steps outside the ambulance, pulling out his phone to capture images of the mechanical snake. As he examines it, he notices an engraving near the camera housing, a tiny scorpion. His satellite phone rings. Torres, his second in command. Boss, you need to see this. We've deployed the ground-penetrating radar. This isn't just a tunnel, it's an entire network. And it's massive. How massive? Preliminary readings suggest at least 3 miles of tunnels, professionally engineered with multiple chambers. This isn't cartel amateurs with shovels. This is military-grade engineering. Jack scans the horizon, the distant mountains of Mexico, dark silhouettes against the night sky. I'm on my way. And Torres, alert White Sands test facility. I want their seismic team on this yesterday. As Jack turns to leave, Border Patrol Chief Daniels approaches, concern etched across his face. Reeves, Washington's breathing down my neck about that UTV. Tell me you've got something. Jack holds up the mechanical snake. Much more than something. You've got a major national security breach here. I'm activating my team. Your team? This is Border Patrol jurisdiction. With all due respect, Chief, you're out of your depth. This isn't just drug runners digging crude tunnels. This is sophisticated infrastructure being built right under your noses. Jack hands him the mechanical snake. While your agents were watching for people climbing over the fence, someone's been building highways underneath it. Back at border, Tactical Response Headquarters, a converted aircraft hangar 10 miles from the border, Jack's team assembles around holographic displays. The cavernous space hums with technology incongruous against the weathered building exterior, a deliberate camouflage of capability. Ana Torres, former SEAL intelligence specialist, manipulates the 3D model generated from their initial scans. Her fingers dance through holographic tunnels, suspended in the air, revealing a complex network beneath the border. "This is unprecedented," she says, zooming out to show the full scale. "We're looking at 3 primary arteries extending at least 5 miles north of the border, with multiple chambers and junction points, air circulation systems, electrical wiring, even what appears to be rail infrastructure." Dr. Michael Weiss, the team's technology expert and former SEAL medical officer, enhances sections of the scan. These support structures use advanced engineering techniques. "See these load-bearing designs? This isn't cartel work. This is professional, mining or military engineering." "It gets worse," says Harlow, examining the mechanical snake under a digital microscope. "This surveillance tech is next generation. Thermal imaging, motion detection, encrypted transmission protocols." The former SEAL demolition expert looks up grimly. "Someone with serious resources and expertise is monitoring our movements." Jack studies the tunnel network, recognition dawning in his eyes. "I've seen this before. Afghanistan, 2017, Taliban had hired ex-Soviet mining engineers to design tunnel networks under our forward operating bases. Same structural supports, same ventilation system design." "You think the cartels hired foreign engineers?" Torres asks. "Or someone with that training?" Jack pulls up a classified file on the main screen. 3 years ago, a joint DEA Mexican military operation reportedly killed Alejandro La Alacran Fuentes during a raid on his compound. Body was allegedly identified and cremated before U.S. personnel arrived. Allegedly? Weiss raises an eyebrow. Fuentes was unique among cartel leaders. Engineering degree from Madrid, specialized in mining operations. Before joining the cartels, he worked for Pemex, the Mexican state oil company, designing deep-sea drilling platforms and tunnel systems for underground pipelines. Jack points to the scorpion symbol on the mechanical snake. This is his signature, and if he's alive, we're dealing with someone who combines cartel ruthlessness with world-class engineering skills. Torres examines thermal imaging from the collapse site. There's more. We've got unusual temperature patterns throughout the tunnel system, cooler areas that could be storage facilities, consistent with refrigeration. Drugs, Harlow suggests. Maybe. Jack zooms in on one section, but this area here is maintained at exactly 62 degrees. That's not typical for drug storage. That's pharmaceutical grade. A notification pings on their secure system. Weiss pulls up a report. Lab results from soil samples at the collapse. Site show traces of fentanyl, but also something else. Chemical precursors I don't recognize. "Send these to Dr. Chen at Quantico," Jack orders. "She specializes in emerging narcotic compounds." "Already did," Weiss says. "She's requesting a video call. says it's urgent. The main screen switches to a video feed. Dr. Linda Chen, FBI's leading pharmacological expert, appears, her expression grave. Commander Reeves, your samples contain something we've been tracking for months. A new synthetic opioid designated TX21. It's orders of magnitude more potent than fentanyl, with a unique delivery mechanism that allows absorption through skin contact. Weaponized? Jack asks. Potentially. The concentration in your samples suggests manufacturing, not just transportation. You may have stumbled onto a production facility, not just a smuggling route. The implications sink in around the room. Not just moving drugs through the tunnels, making them there where US authorities couldn't reach. There's something else, Dr. Chen continues. TX21 was theoretically designed by a DARPA project 10 years ago, exploring non-lethal chemical incapacitants for military applications. The project was supposedly terminated, all research classified. So how did it end up in a cartel tunnel? Torres asks. That's what concerns us. Only a handful of people had access to that research. Jack's secure phone vibrates with an incoming text. Unknown number, but the message freezes his blood. Still afraid of being buried alive, Commander? The Scorpion remembers Kandahar. Only one person could know about what happened in those mountains, about the tunnel collapse that nearly killed Jack's entire squad. A mission so classified, it didn't officially exist. Dr. Chen, I'll have my team coordinate with yours on containment protocols. Jack ends the call, then turns to his team. Decision made. This just went from border security to national security. Torres, get the full tactical team assembled. Weiss, I want complete specs on that tunnel system within the hour. Harlow, prep the seismic charges. We may need to collapse sections of this network. As the team mobilizes, Jack stares at the message on his phone, memories flooding back, the weight of Earth crushing him, the dwindling oxygen, the sound of digging coming closer, not knowing if it was rescue or execution. Sir, Torres interrupts. His thoughts. You okay? Jack locks his phone. La Alacran isn't just building tunnels for drug smuggling. He's creating infrastructure for something bigger, and somehow it's connected to a classified operation from my past. The hanging lights flicker momentarily, dust drifting down from the ceiling as a barely perceptible tremor passes through the building. They're still digging, Jack says quietly, and they know we've found them. Dawn breaks over the Sonoran Desert, painting the landscape in hues of amber and gold. At Border Tactical Response Headquarters, the command center pulses with activity. Satellite imagery and tunnel schematics dominate wall-mounted displays, while team members analyze data streams flowing in from portable seismic sensors deployed around the collapse site. Jack Reeves studies topographical maps spread across a central table, terrain features marked with elevation contours and geological formations. His weathered fingers trace potential tunnel paths, tapping points where the network might emerge on US soil. The main artery follows the watershed, he mutters, circling a dry riverbed. Smart. The loose sediment makes digging easier, and seasonal water flow masks any ground disturbances from satellite surveillance. Ana Torres approaches with a secure tablet. Border Patrol has established a 5-mile containment perimeter around the collapse site. No media access, satellite coverage. Temporarily restricted under national security protocols. Good. Last thing we need is panic about cartel super tunnels and weaponized opioids hitting the news cycle. Jack straightens. wincing slightly as old injuries protest. "Where are we on team status?" "Core team is assembled and prepping equipment," Torres replies, scrolling through personnel files. "I've pulled in our reserve specialists based on tunnel profile analysis. Tactical, medical, and engineering expertise prioritized. The hangar doors slide open as a convoy of matte black SUVs enters. The vehicles form a semicircle before coming to a stop, and team members emerge carrying equipment cases and weapons. Cutters, ear," Torres notes, as a tall, powerfully built man steps from the lead vehicle. Former Navy SEAL Lieutenant Commander Blake Carter Williams surveys the command center with the measured gaze of someone assessing tactical advantages. His skin is burnished by years under desert suns from Iraq to Afghanistan, a jagged scar running from temple to jaw on the right side of his face. A reminder of an IED that nearly ended his career. Jack moves to meet him, extending a hand. "Appreciate the quick response, especially given the circumstances of our last operation. Tehran was a clusterfuck," Cutter replies bluntly, accepting the handshake. "But that wasn't on you." His eyes scan the tunnel schematics. Torres says, "We've got a subterranean nightmare brewing. Worse than we initially thought. Possible WMD component." Cutter's expression darkens. "Cartels escalating from decapitation. Videos to chemical weapons. That's a significant line to cross. That's why I need your tunnel expertise. You ran more underground operations in Kandahar than anyone else in the program." "Ancient history," Cutter says, though his tone suggests otherwise. "Are we operating under Border Patrol Authority or DHS?" "Neither. As of Aero 400, we're classified. Under Joint Special Operations Command. Direct line to Pentagon. Complete operational autonomy." Cutter nods appreciatively. "No bureaucratic handcuffs. Who else have you tapped?" As if on cue, the sound of helicopter rotors grows louder outside. A sleek black helicopter settles on the landing pad, kicking up swirls of desert dust. "Ghost is here," Torres announces, checking her watch. 12 minutes early." From the helicopter emerges a slender woman with close-cropped silver hair, despite being in her early 40s. Dr. Eleanor, Ghost. Vasquez moves with the efficient grace of someone who has learned to minimize expenditure of energy, a necessary adaptation for survival in hostile environments. Her olive complexion bears the subtle marks of someone who has endured extreme conditions, though whether physical or psychological isn't immediately apparent. "Our extraction specialist," Jack explains to Cutter. "Ex-pararescue turned geophysicist. Developed the Lazarus Protocol for deep extraction operations after the Colombian mining disaster. If anyone can navigate those tunnels safely, it's her." Ghost approaches, carrying only a small case that belies her reputation. Her handshake is brief, her Spanish accent slight but noticeable. "Commander, the seismic readings from your site have unusual patterns. These tunnels have secondary and tertiary fail-safes built into their structural supports." "Meaning?" Jack asks. "Meaning they're designed to collapse in specific sequences if compromised. Whoever built this network doesn't want anyone mapping it completely. They've engineered dead ends and false passages that trigger cascading cave-ins if breached incorrectly." "Can you circumvent the fail-safes?" Cutter asks. Ghost studies him. "With analytical detachment. I designed similar systems for our operations in Helmand province. With proper equipment and sufficient time, yes. Jack gestures toward the command center. All resources at your disposal, whatever you need. As they move inside, a motorcycle roars up to the hangar, a customized Triumph scrambler kicking up. Dust as it skids to a halt. The rider dismounts with fluid efficiency, removing a helmet to reveal sun-streaked hair and a face that seems perpetually ready to break into a grin, despite the gravity of the situation. "Finn's here," Torres says unnecessarily. Tyler Finn Finnegan strides into the command center with the loose-limbed confidence of someone comfortable in any environment. The former SEAL communications specialist and cyber warfare expert carries a backpack that undoubtedly contains cutting-edge technology of questionable legal status. "Heard you found some underground real estate for me to explore," Finn says by way of greeting, his Australian accent still pronounced despite years in US special operations. His eyes immediately gravitate to the technical displays, assessing and analyzing. "We need your signal expertise," Jack explains. "The tunnels have an integrated surveillance system we haven't seen before. Mechanical snakes with cameras, motion sensors embedded in support structures, possibly remote-controlled defensive mechanisms." Finn whistles appreciatively. "Cartel's gone high-tech. What's the communication protocol they're using?" Torres brings up spectral analysis on a nearby screen. "That's the problem. It's utilizing frequency-hopping patterns similar to military-grade encrypted communications." "Which cartel has this capability?" Finn asks, already connecting his equipment to the central system. "That's another question we need answered," Jack replies. "The signature points to El Alacran, but he's supposedly been dead for 3 years." "I've heard that song before," Finn mutters, fingers flying across his keyboard. "Half the targets we eliminated in Afghanistan had remarkable resurrection abilities. The final vehicle arrives, an armored medical transport with US government plates, but no specific agency markings. Dr. Samira Nazari steps out, carrying specialized cases, bearing biohazard symbols. The former combat surgeon now serves as the CDC's leading field specialist on chemical and biological threats. "Dr. Nazari," Jack greets her formally, "thank you for the expedited response." When the CDC director personally calls at 3 a.m. about weaponized DARPA compounds, sleep becomes a low priority, she replies crisply. Her hijab frames an intense gaze that shifts immediately to the tunnel schematics. "Where's your contamination zone?" Jack indicates a section of the tunnel network. "Initial samples were recovered here, but concentration levels suggest the production facility is deeper in the network, possibly here." He points to a large chamber approximately 2 miles into Mexican territory. Dr. Nazari studies the layout. "If they're manufacturing TX-21 in these quantities, the environmental contamination risk is severe. One rupture could poison the groundwater for 3 counties. That's why we need your expertise on containment and neutralization," Jack explains. "We can't just collapse the tunnels without addressing what's inside them first." As Dr. Nazari begins unpacking specialized detection equipment, the core team assembles around the central command table. Jack activates a secure holographic display that illuminates their faces in blue light. "Here's what we know," he begins. "We're dealing with a tunnel network of unprecedented scale and sophistication. 3 primary arteries extend at least 5 miles into US territory, with numerous chambers, junctions, and possible exit points." He expands a section of the hologram. "Based on thermal signatures and structural design, we believe the network serves multiple functions: smuggling, manufacturing, and possibly staging for larger operations. Torres takes over, highlighting specific sections. Ground-penetrating radar shows chambers with temperature control, ventilation systems, and what appears to be rail infrastructure for moving heavy materials. The engineering exceeds anything we've seen from cartel operations before. The tunnels are also rigged with surveillance and defense systems, Finn adds, pulling up schematics of the mechanical snake. These devices utilize military-grade encryption and components that aren't commercially available. Someone with serious resources and connections is backing this operation. Most concerning is the presence of TX-21, Dr. Nazari continues. This compound was developed under classified research as a potential non-lethal incapacitant, but its current formulation is weaponized. Skin contact causes immediate neurological effects, disorientation, hallucinations, and ultimately unconsciousness. Concentrated exposure is fatal, and someone is manufacturing it right under our feet, Ghost concludes. In facilities designed to be collapsed and buried if discovered. Jack retrieves the mechanical snake, placing it on the table. This carries the signature of Alejandro El Alacrán Fuentes, one of the most dangerous cartel leaders Mexico has ever produced. His specialty was infrastructure, tunnels, bunkers, escape routes for cartel operations. I thought he was eliminated in a joint operation with Mexican authorities, Cutter says, studying the scorpion emblem. So did everyone, Jack replies. But I received a message referencing an operation in Kandahar that only someone from that mission would know about. The team exchanges glances, understanding the implications. Black operations are rarely discussed, even among those who participated in them. Kandahar 2017, Jack continues after a moment's hesitation. Our unit was tasked with eliminating a Taliban bomb maker who developed a new type of IED responsible for dozens of coalition casualties. Intelligence located him in a mountain compound with extensive tunnel networks. We inserted under darkness, but the intel was compromised. Jack's gaze grows distant. The tunnels were rigged to collapse. 6 of us were trapped 100 feet underground when the charges detonated. No communication, limited oxygen, with Taliban forces digging toward us from multiple directions. How did you get out? Dr. Nazari asks quietly. We didn't, not on our own. After 72 hours, we were extracted by a specialist team led by a Mexican-American engineer attached to U.S. forces. He had mining experience, understood the mountain's geology better than the Taliban did, created a rescue shaft that bypassed their listener posts. Let me guess, Cutter interjects. Alejandro Fuentes. Jack nods. Before he returned to Mexico and joined the cartels, he saved our lives, then used the same skills to become one of the most effective killers in the drug war. The revelation settles over the team, adding a layer of complexity to their mission. The message I received referenced details only someone from that operation would know, Jack continues. If Fuentes is alive, he's taunting us. And if he's building infrastructure of this scale, it's not just for smuggling drugs. He's preparing for something bigger. What's our operational timeline? Ghost asks, ever practical. Jack brings up a topographical map highlighting key infrastructure. Seismic sensors show continued excavation activity, moving toward critical locations, water treatment facilities, power distribution nodes, communication hubs. Based on their current rate of progress, we have 72 hours before they establish positions under key infrastructure throughout the region. 3 days to locate and neutralize an underground network that's been years in the making, Cutter summarizes. Grimly, while dealing with potential chemical weapons and a cartel leader with intimate knowledge of our tactics. Jack surveys his assembled team, among the most elite operators and specialists the United States can field. Each face reflects the gravity of the situation, but also the determined resolve of professionals who have faced impossible odds before. We start with site reconnaissance and forward operating base establishment, Jack decides. Finn, I want complete signal mapping of their communication network. Ghost, develop ingress points that bypass their failsafes. Dr. Nazari, prepare containment protocols for TX-21 exposure. Cutter, tactical assessment for all potential points of contact. As the team disperses to their assignments, Torres remains at Jack's side. There's something else troubling you about this, she observes quietly. Jack stares at the tunnel holograms, the network spreading like a malignant growth beneath the border. In Kandahar, Fuentes said something I never reported officially. After we were extracted, he told me the true power of tunnels isn't in moving through them. It's in what you can position beneath your enemy without them knowing. You think this is about more than drugs or smuggling? I think Fuentes is playing a longer game, Jack replies grimly. These tunnels reach critical infrastructure that affects millions of people. Water, power, communications. He's not just building smuggling routes, he's positioning himself to hold entire cities hostage. The distant sound of helicopter rotors announces the arrival of additional equipment and personnel. Outside, the sun climbs higher in the desert sky, promising scorching heat that will soon have the landscape shimmering with mirages, illusions of water where none exists. Beneath that same ground, a different kind of mirage has taken form. The illusion of security, undermined by passages carved through bedrock and sand, weakening the very foundation of the border. Jack checks his weapon, a ritual that has preceded every mission of his career, and heads toward the waiting vehicles. The hunt for the Devil's Highway has begun. The desert heat shimmers above the asphalt as a convoy of unmarked vehicles approaches the collapse site. Jack rides in the lead SUV, reviewing operational parameters with Torres, while surveillance drones relay real-time footage to tablets mounted on the dashboard. The collapsed section has been secured with a temporary structure resembling a construction site, a cover story for the extensive equipment now surrounding the sinkhole. Border Patrol has cleared all civilian personnel, Torres reports. Official story is that we're investigating structural instability in the watershed. Environmental hazard protocols give us authority to maintain the restricted perimeter. Jack nods, studying the aerial view. Finn, what's our communication status? Through the secure channel, Finn's voice comes through clearly. Set up signal. Jammers in a 3-mile radius. Any electronic communication in or out goes through our filters. If our Scorpion friend tries to activate surveillance, we'll intercept it. Ghost, what's your assessment on safe entry points? The geophysicists. Voice is methodical, scientific. Based on ground-penetrating radar, I've identified 3 potential access points with minimal risk of triggering cascading collapses. The original breach site remains the most direct route to the main tunnel artery, but requires reinforcement before we can safely descend. As the convoy pulls into the secured area, Jack notes the extensive equipment already deployed: portable laboratories, communication arrays, tactical gear organized in weatherproof containers. Dr. Nazari has established a decontamination station near the command tent, its yellow biohazard markings stark against the desert landscape. Perimeter sensors are active, Cutter reports, joining them as they exit the vehicles. Motion, thermal and seismic. Nothing gets within half a mile without us knowing. The team gathers around a portable tactical table where a 3D hologram displays the tunnel network mapped thus far. Ghost manipulates the display, highlighting structural features. The main artery runs northwest to southeast, roughly parallel to the border, but extending into both countries. Average depth is 60 feet, though sections dive deeper to bypass. Underground obstacles. Primary support structures appear to be reinforced concrete with steel mesh. Excessive for smuggling operations, but consistent with long-term infrastructure. She zooms in on the chamber nearest to their position. This area shows thermal signatures consistent with recent human activity, approximately 1,000 square feet, ceiling height adequate for standing. Based on power consumption readings, it likely served as a forward operating base for tunnel excavation. Jack studies the layout. Distance from our position, 300 meters horizontal, 60 vertical. The original collapse created a partial access point, but we'll need to stabilize it before sending personnel down. Timeline? Ghost checks. Calculations on her tablet. With the equipment we've brought, 4 hours for safe access preparation. Jack nods, then turns to Dr. Nazari. What are the environmental readings showing? The CDC specialist gestures to monitoring equipment surrounding the sinkhole. We're detecting trace amounts of TX-21 in the air emanating from the opening. Concentrations are below danger threshold for brief exposure, but I'd recommend level B protection for anyone working near the access point. And inside the tunnels? Unknown. Until we get sensors in place, but I'd assume level A protection for initial entry. If they're manufacturing this compound in quantity, contamination levels could be significantly higher, deeper in the network. Jack turns to Finn, who's monitoring an array of electronic equipment. Any communication signals from inside? Nothing active at the moment, the communications expert replies. But I'm picking up remnants of a sophisticated mesh network. They've installed signal repeaters throughout the tunnel system, military grade, designed to maintain communications even if sections are cut off. Similar to what we used in Mosul, Cutter observes. Allows for compartmentalized operations, even if the main network is compromised. Jack absorbs the information, mentally assembling the tactical picture. Torres, organize the entry teams. I want 2 tactical elements ready for initial exploration once Ghost gives us the green light. Cutter leads Alpha team, focusing on the main artery. I'll take Bravo to investigate the chamber Ghost identified. Equipment loadout? Torres asks. Full. Tactical gear, level A protection, as Dr. Nazari recommended. 4-hour oxygen supply, communication redundancies, and breaching tools. We don't know what kind of internal security measures we might encounter. As the team disperses to prepare, Jack moves to the edge of the sinkhole, studying the ragged opening torn in the earth. Beyond the immediate security perimeter, the desert stretches in all directions, seemingly empty but teeming with hidden life, adapted to survive in one of the planet's most hostile environments. A parallel occurs to him. The cartels have similarly adapted, evolving from crude smuggling operations to sophisticated criminal enterprises with infrastructure rivaling government capabilities. The tunnels represent the latest evolution, invisible, protected, and potentially game-changing in the ongoing border conflict. Penny for your thoughts, Dr. Nazari says, joining him at the perimeter. Thinking about adaptation, Jack replies. 20 years ago, cartels used human mules crossing the desert. 10 years ago, they launched ultralights dropping drug packages. Now they're building underground highways with environmental controls and surveillance systems. While our response remains fundamentally reactive, she observes, always one step behind, until now. Jack turns to face her. This time we caught them mid-construction. We have a chance to get ahead of whatever they're planning. Dr. Nazari glances at the monitoring equipment. Speaking of which, these TX-21 readings concern me. The compound was designed with specific military applications in mind. Temporary incapacitation for clearing hostile areas without civilian casualties. But the formulation I'm detecting has been modified. Modified how? Increased potency, extended effect duration, and, most troubling, enhanced absorption rates. The original compound required aerosolization for effectiveness. This version can transfer through skin contact or contaminated water supplies. The implications settle heavily. You're saying they could use it to contaminate municipal water systems? Theoretically, enough concentrated TX-21 in a water treatment facility could affect an entire city. Effects would begin with disorientation and hallucinations, progressing to unconsciousness within hours. Without the antidote, neurological damage becomes permanent after 24 hours. Is there an antidote available? The CDC has limited supplies based on the original formula. I've requested emergency production, but if this modified version has significant changes, our existing protocols may be insufficient. Their conversation is interrupted as one of the perimeter sensors triggers an alert. Torres approaches rapidly. Motion detection on the western perimeter. Thermal imaging shows a single human signature approaching through the arroyo. Jack immediately shifts to tactical mode. Cartel scout, unclear. No weapon signature detected. Subject appears to be female, moving openly rather than attempting concealment. Curious rather than alarmed, Jack follows Torres to the western observation post. Through high-powered optics, he observes a woman making her way along the dry creek bed. She moves with purpose rather than caution, occasionally consulting what appears to be a handheld device. Civilian researcher who missed the evacuation order. Dr. Nazari suggests, unlikely, Jack replies. This area has been cleared for 24 hours and her approach vector comes from uninhabited terrain. He makes a decision. Torres, have a security team intercept standard protocol, non-threatening but thorough. Within minutes, 2 tactical vehicles depart the perimeter, converging on the approaching figure from different angles. Through the observation feed, Jack watches as the team secures the woman without incident, conducting a preliminary search before escorting her back to the command area. As they approach, Jack's initial curiosity transforms into shock. The woman's face is hauntingly familiar, high cheekbones, intense grey eyes, and a small scar bisecting her left eyebrow. Though years older than when he last saw her, there's no mistaking Dr. Maya Reeves, his ex-wife. I need to speak with Commander Reeves, she tells the security team as they reach the perimeter. Her voice carries the same authoritative tone Jack remembers from their marriage, a blending of scientific precision and barely contained impatience. Maya? Jack steps forward, signaling the security team to stand down. What are you doing here? She meets his gaze directly, professional rather than personal. Hello, Jack. I'm here because DARPA sent me. I understand you've encountered TX-21. For a moment, the years between them collapse. Maya had been a chemical engineer when they met, her work classified even from him. Their marriage lasted 3 years before the combined pressures of his deployments and her research created an unbridgeable distance. The divorce was finalized while he was overseas, the papers delivered to his forward operating base in Afghanistan. "You're with DARPA now?" he asks, regaining his composure. "I've been with them all along," she replies. "My position at Brookhaven was a cover for classified research." She gestures to the sinkhole. Research that appears to have been weaponized and is now sitting under our feet. The implications hit Jack like a physical blow. "You developed TX-21. I led the team that created the original compound." "Yes, a non-lethal alternative to existing chemical agents, designed specifically to minimize civilian casualties in urban warfare scenarios." Her expression hardens. "The program was terminated in 2015, all research secured in classified archives. Or so we believed." Jack motions her toward the command tent, away from curious eyes. "Dr. Nazari has detected modified TX-21 emanating from the tunnel system, supposedly improved for weapons application." Maya's expression grows troubled. "That's why I'm here. 3 weeks ago, DARPA security identified unauthorized access to archived TX-21 research. The breach was sophisticated. Whoever did it accessed not just the compound specifications, but also our unreleased research on potential modifications we deemed too dangerous to pursue." "You traced the breach here?" "No," she admits. "The intrusion was routed through multiple international servers, but when DHS flagged your TX-21 detection report, I was dispatched immediately. I may be the only person who fully understands the compound's capabilities and vulnerabilities." Jack processes this new information, professional needs overriding personal history. "Dr. Nazari is handling our chemical assessment. You should coordinate with her on containment strategies." Maya nods. "All business. I brought specialized detection equipment calibrated specifically for TX-21 and its derivatives. Also, preliminary doses of an improved antidote based on our latest research." Torres approaches, her expression carefully neutral as she assesses the unexpected visitor. "Commander, Ghost reports the access shaft is ready for preliminary inspection. Engineering team awaits your authorization. Tell them to proceed with unmanned reconnaissance first. Drone insertion to map the immediate chamber and check for active threats." As Torres departs, Maya studies the tactical displays showing the tunnel network. This is extensive infrastructure for a drug smuggling operation. "We don't believe drugs are the primary objective," Jack explains. "The tunnel system appears designed for strategic positioning beneath critical infrastructure, water treatment, power distribution, communications nodes. Creating potential leverage points for large-scale extortion," Maya concludes, her analytical mind quickly grasping the implications. "But manufacturing TX-21 requires specialized equipment, controlled environments, expert personnel. The investment is enormous compared to traditional cartel operations, which suggests either external funding or objectives beyond immediate profit." Jack brings up intelligence files on the main display. "We believe the operation is run by Alejandro El Alacran Fuentes, supposedly killed 3 years ago." Maya studies the file. The mining engineer turned cartel leader. His infrastructure projects revolutionized smuggling operations across the border. She pauses, noticing something in the file. "He studied at Madrid Polytechnic?" "Yes, before returning to Mexico to work for Pemex." "That's concerning." Maya pulls out her tablet, accessing secured files. One of my research assistants on the TX-21 project was a visiting scholar from Madrid Polytechnic, brilliant chemist specializing in delivery mechanisms for pharmaceutical compounds. He returned to Spain after the project was terminated. Jack feels a chill despite the desert heat. You think there's a connection? I think it's an unlikely coincidence that a cartel leader with advanced engineering expertise and potential connection to my former research assistant is building infrastructure beneath the border while manufacturing a compound I helped develop. Their conversation is interrupted as Finn hurries into the command tent. We've got something. Drone recon of the first chamber is coming through now. The main display switches to live feed from a specialized reconnaissance drone navigating the stabilized access shaft. Its lights illuminate rough-hewn walls, giving way to a constructed tunnel with reinforced supports. The drone emerges into a larger space the chamber Ghost had identified from thermal readings. Definitely a forward operating base, Cutter observes, joining them at the display. Look at the power infrastructure, ventilation systems. They were prepared for extended operations. The drone's camera pans across abandoned equipment, drilling machinery, electrical systems, supplies stacked along the walls. Portable workstations indicate technical operations beyond simple excavation. Can you get closer to those workstations? Maya asks. Finn manipulates the drone controls, bringing the camera in for a detailed view of a hastily abandoned technical area. Computer equipment remains in place, though powered down. What catches everyone's attention, however, are chemical diagrams sketched on a whiteboard. Molecular structures immediately recognizable to Maya. That's TX-21, she confirms, but with modifications to the delivery mechanism. They've altered the molecular structure to increase environmental persistence. It won't break down in water or air as the original compound would, making it viable for infrastructure contamination, Dr. Nazari concludes, having joined them to observe the feed. Could they be planning to introduce it into water systems? Possible, Maya replies. The modified structure would resist standard filtration and treatment methods. Properly deployed, it could affect tens of thousands before being detected. The drone continues its exploration, moving deeper into the chamber. Near the far wall, it discovers something that causes a collective intake of breath. A spray-painted insignia on the concrete. A red scorpion wrapped around a drill bit, with Spanish. Words beneath it. Can you enhance that text? Jack requests. Finn adjusts the image, sharpening the resolution. The Spanish phrase becomes clear. El alacrán cava más profundo que la muerte. The scorpion digs deeper than death. That confirms Fuentes is involved, Torres says. But the chamber appears abandoned. They've moved operations deeper into the network. Jack studies the layout, making rapid tactical assessments. The equipment was left in place, which suggests they evacuated quickly after the surface collapse. They likely have secondary and tertiary facilities deeper in the system. If they're manufacturing TX-21 in quantity, they'll need significantly larger facilities than this forward base, Maya adds, with specialized ventilation, containment protocols, chemical storage. Jack turns to Ghost, who has been analyzing structural data from the drone feed. Based on the tunnel configuration, where would you place a large-scale production facility? The geophysicist manipulates the 3D model. If I were designing this network, I'd place major facilities where geological features provide natural advantages. Stable, bedrock, natural ventilation possibilities, access to groundwater for cooling systems, based on our mapping and regional geology. She highlights a section of the tunnel network approximately 4 miles from their position, well into Mexican territory. This area meets all criteria. The tunnel dimensions increase significantly, and power consumption readings are consistent. With large-scale operations, 4 miles underground through potentially hostile territory, Cutter summarizes. With unknown defensive measures and possible chemical contamination, standard day at the office. Jack makes his decision. We proceed with manned exploration of the initial chamber. 2 tactical teams as planned, with Dr. Nazari's team monitoring environmental conditions. Maya, you'll coordinate with the chemical assessment team from here. She raises an eyebrow. I didn't come all this way to watch from the sidelines, Jack. I understand TX-21 better than anyone alive. If they've modified it, I need direct samples to develop effective countermeasures. The familiar, stubborn determination in her expression reminds Jack why arguments with Maya inevitably ended in stalemate. Her logical precision was unassailable when she believed herself right. Fine. You'll accompany Dr. Nazari's team for the initial chamber assessment, but remain with the second element. Full protective equipment, and you follow tactical commands without question. His tone makes clear this isn't negotiable. Maya nods. Acceptance. The DARPA transport that brought me carried specialized containment equipment and a mobile laboratory for field analysis. It should arrive within the hour. As the team disperses to prepare for the first manned entry into the tunnel system, Jack finds himself momentarily alone with Maya. The weight of their shared past and unexpected present creates an awkward silence, broken only by the background activity of the base camp. I didn't know you were stationed along the border now, she finally says. Last I heard, you were running counter-terrorism operations overseas. Things change, Jack replies simply. Threats evolve, priorities shift. And priorities became personal, Maya observes. After Kandahar, the reference to his near-death experience catches him off guard. You knew about that? It was classified beyond your clearance. I still had friends in military research. When your unit was declared missing, I made inquiries. She hesitates. I may not have been your wife anymore, but I still cared what happened. To you, Jack. Before he can formulate a response, Torres approaches with updated equipment manifests, the moment for personal reconnection passing as quickly as it had arrived. The mission resumes its rightful priority, personal history subsumed beneath the immediate threat stretching beneath their feet like a poisonous root system, threatening to deliver toxic fruit to unsuspecting communities above. As Jack checks his protective gear and weapons, the text message from earlier echoes in his mind. Still afraid of being buried alive, Commander? The Scorpion remembers Kandahar. The connection between his past and present grows clearer, a personal vendetta interwoven with cartel operations and stolen chemical weapons research. Whatever Fuentes is planning goes beyond drugs or territory. It has become personal, with Jack positioned as both target and hunter. The tunnel entrance awaits, a mouth opened in the earth leading to darkness, and answers that may prove more dangerous than the questions that preceded them. The late afternoon sun casts long shadows across the command area as final preparations for tunnel entry commence. Jack stands before his assembled team, all now dressed in specialized protective gear, a hybrid of tactical equipment and chemical protection suits designed for maximum mobility while providing Level A containment. Against environmental hazards, our mission parameters are clear, Jack begins, his voice slightly muffled through his respirator. Primary objective is reconnaissance of the tunnel network, focusing on extent, purpose, and threat assessment. Secondary objective is securing evidence of TX-21 production and deployment plans. Tertiary is identification and apprehension of key personnel, particularly Alejandro Fuentes if he's present. He activates a holographic display showing their planned route. We'll proceed in 2 elements. Alpha team led by Cutter will secure the initial chamber and establish a forward operating base. Bravo team under my command will advance along the main tunnel artery to investigate thermal signatures indicating recent activity. Dr. Nazari steps forward, holding specialized detection equipment. Each team will carry these enhanced chemical sensors calibrated specifically for TX-21 and its derivatives. Yellow warning activates at 5 ppm. Respiratory irritation begins. Orange at 15 ppm. Skin absorption becomes dangerous. Red at 30 ppm. Immediate evacuation required. Your suits will protect you for approximately 15 minutes at red level. Exposure. She distributes auto-injectors to each team member. These contain a neutralizing agent effective against the original TX-21 formula. We don't know if they'll work against modified versions, but they're better than nothing if your suit. Integrity is compromised. Maya, now dressed in the same protective gear as the others, checks the specialized sampling kit she'll carry. Remember, we need intact samples from different areas of the tunnel system, environmental residue, manufacturing byproducts, and hopefully, intact containers of the compound itself. These will be crucial for developing effective countermeasures. Jack continues with operational details. Communication will utilize encrypted mesh networking. Each team member serves as a relay point, extending our range throughout the tunnel system. If the network is compromised, fall back to analog procedures. 3. Clicks means advance. 2 means hold position. 1 continuous tone signals immediate evacuation. He surveys the assembled specialists, former special operations personnel now serving in border tactical response, each selected for specific expertise, relevant to subterranean operations. Despite the masks concealing their faces, Jack reads their body language. The focused tension, the measured breathing of veterans preparing for high-risk insertion. Ghost will monitor structural integrity from the command center. Any indication of deliberate collapse triggers immediate withdrawal. Remember, Fuentes is an engineer who specializes in using terrain against his enemies. The entire tunnel system could be rigged to destroy evidence and eliminate pursuers. Torres distributes final equipment loads, each tailored to individual team roles. Oxygen supplies show 4 hours at normal consumption rates. Emergency rebreathers. Add another 60 minutes if primary systems fail. Standard tactical loadout with modified breaching charges designed for minimal structural impact. Jack checks his weapon, a modified MP7 selected for its effectiveness in confined spaces, then addresses a final critical point. We have credible intelligence that Fuentes knows our tactics and may have designed his defenses specifically to counter them. Standard operating procedures may be anticipated. Be prepared to adapt on-site based on encountered conditions. The teams move toward the stabilized access shaft, now reinforced with portable structural supports and equipped with a mechanical descent system. The mouth of the tunnel seems to consume light itself, a perfect black circle against the desert floor. Ghost approaches Jack, before he descends. We've placed seismic sensors throughout the access shaft and initial chamber. They'll provide early warning of any structural changes, natural or deliberate. But the deeper you go, the less accurate our monitoring becomes. Keep the extraction. In team on standby, Jack replies. If we lose communication or seismic readings indicate collapse, initiate emergency protocols immediately. Don't wait for confirmation. The geophysicist nods. The geology changes significantly 2 miles in transitions, from alluvial sediment to limestone karst formations. Those areas will have different structural vulnerabilities. Proceed with extreme caution there. As the first team members begin their descent, Finn provides a final communications check. Signal repeaters will deploy automatically every 200 meters, extending our network as you advance. If you encounter jamming or interference, it likely indicates active countermeasures rather than natural attenuation. Jack waits until Alpha Team has completely descended before leading Bravo toward the shaft. Maya joins his element, her movements, exhibiting the careful precision of someone unaccustomed to tactical operations, but determined to perform correctly. Stay behind me. Maintain arm's distance from the person in front of you and verbalize any equipment issues immediately. He instructs her. If I give an order, execute it without question. Seconds matter underground. I've worked in BSL-4 containment facilities, Jack, she replies evenly. I understand protocol discipline. The descent is methodical, each team member controlling their own rate using specialized harnesses while maintaining formation integrity. The shaft opens into the initial chamber after 60 vertical feet, the space now illuminated by tactical lights that create sharply defined shadows against the rough-hewn walls. Alpha Team has already established a security perimeter, their weapons covering all tunnel entrances leading from the chamber. Cutter approaches as Jack's element reaches the floor. Chamber is secure, no personnel encountered, no active surveillance detected. Chemical readings show trace amounts of TX-21, but below warning thresholds. Jack surveys the abandoned forward, operating base. The drone reconnaissance had provided good intelligence, but being physically present offers new insights. The construction quality exceeds anything he's seen in previous Cartel tunnels. Reinforced supports, proper ventilation, electrical conduits embedded in the walls rather than exposed. This wasn't hasty excavation. It was professional engineering designed for long-term use. Maya moves directly to the abandoned workstations, examining the chemical diagrams with focused intensity. These modifications are sophisticated, she observes, photographing the whiteboard with a specialized camera. Whoever adapted my work understood the compound at a molecular level. These aren't crude alterations, they're elegant refinements that enhance the original design parameters. Dr. Nazari joins her, collecting surface samples from the workstation. The residue concentration suggests experimental work rather than production. They were finalizing the formula here before moving to large-scale manufacturing. Jack examines mapping equipment left behind, detailed geological surveys extending miles beyond their current position. They've charted everything: bedrock density, water tables, existing infrastructure locations. This isn't opportunistic tunneling. They're deliberately positioning themselves beneath specific targets. Torres identifies markings on the maps. These correlations match surface infrastructure, water, treatment facilities, power distribution nodes, fiber optic junction points. They're creating access to critical systems. Tactical leverage, Cutter concludes. Position yourself where you can cripple essential services, and you control the region more effectively than any army. Jack notices something else on the abandoned. Monitors what appears to be a scheduling document. Though the text is in Spanish, the timeline format is universal. They're working against specific deadlines, he notes. Phase markers indicate progressive expansion with target completion 4 weeks from now. Coordinating with something else? Torres suggests. Possibly. Or maximizing impact during peak usage periods. Jack photographs the document for later. Analysis then focuses on the 3 tunnel entrances leading from the main chamber. Alpha Team, secure this chamber as our forward operating base. Establish communication relays and prepare for potential casualties. Bravo Team prepares to advance. Along the main artery, he consults the thermal mapping Ghost had provided. The most recent activity traces lead northwest, following this larger tunnel. That's our primary route. As Bravo Team forms up at the designated tunnel entrance, Maya completes her sample collection. Preliminary field analysis confirms modified. TX-21, she reports. The alterations focus on environmental persistence and absorption efficiency. They've weaponized it for infrastructure deployment rather than direct application. Meaning, Jack asks. Meaning they could introduce it into water systems, ventilation networks, even applying it to surfaces for delayed effect. The compound would remain viable for days rather than hours, continuing to affect anyone who came into contact with it. The implications settle heavily on the team. This isn't just about smuggling or local control. It's potential chemical terrorism affecting entire communities. Jack checks his chemical sensor, confirming levels remain below warning thresholds, then signals Bravo Team to advance. The tunnel, beyond the chamber, narrows slightly, but remains large enough for comfortable movement. Approximately 8 feet high and 6 feet wide, with smooth walls indicating mechanical excavation rather than hand digging. Professional mining equipment, Torres observes, examining tool marks on the wall, possibly repurposed from legitimate operations. The team advances methodically, each member covering specific sectors while maintaining formation integrity. Every 50 meters, Finn's automated signal repeaters deploy, extending their communication network deeper into the tunnel system. The air grows noticeably cooler as they progress, the ventilation system creating a steady flow from deeper within the network. After approximately half a mile, the tunnel branches. The main artery continues northwest, while a smaller passage diverts northeast. Jack consults the thermal mapping. Both show recent activity, but the northeast branch runs directly beneath a water treatment facility serving Nogales. Split the team, Torres suggests. Jack considers the tactical situation. No, we maintain force cohesion for this first exploration. We'll follow the main artery to establish the primary network configuration, then double back to investigate offshoots. As they continue along the main tunnel, Maya's chemical sensor shows increasing readings, still below warning threshold, but the trend indicates higher concentrations ahead. The compound density is growing, she reports, consistent with proximity to a production area. The tunnel begins a gradual descent, the grade subtle but noticeable. The construction changes as well, concrete reinforcement giving way to sections where the tunnel has been bored directly through bedrock, the walls smoother and more uniform. We're entering the limestone cast Ghost mentioned. Jack notes. Natural cave systems they've modified and connected. Approximately 1 mile from the entrance chamber, they encountered the first sign of sophisticated defense measures. Torres spots it first, a subtle change in the floor texture ahead. Hold position, she signals, dropping to one knee to examine the section more closely. Pressure plate triggers embedded in the floor, professionally camouflaged, Jack studies. The setup, anti-personnel or structural? Both, potentially. Torres traces wiring disappearing into the wall. Primary charge would target personnel, secondary linked to support structures. Anyone triggering it dies, and the tunnel collapses to prevent pursuit or recovery. Can you bypass it? Torres examines the mechanism with practiced expertise. Yes, but it'll take time to do it safely. This isn't Cartel standard, it's military-grade engineering. While Torres works to neutralize the trap, Jack has the team establish a security perimeter, covering both forward positions and their withdrawal route. Maya uses the opportunity to collect additional environmental samples from the tunnel walls. The compound concentration in the air continues to increase, she reports. Not hazardous yet, but the gradient suggests significant quantities ahead. After 20 minutes of careful work, Torres signals completion. Pressure triggers neutralized. Explosive charges remain in place, but disconnected from detonation mechanisms. The team advances past the disabled trap, moving with heightened caution. Within 200 meters, they encounter a second defensive position, this one more sophisticated than the first. Motion and thermal sensors, Torres identifies, examining nearly invisible devices embedded in the tunnel walls. Linked to some kind of automated response system, she traces conduits running along the ceiling, possibly chemical dispensers designed to flood the tunnel if unauthorized movement is detected. Jack studies the system with growing concern. Each defensive layer shows increasing sophistication, deliberately designed to eliminate pursuers with minimal risk to the infrastructure itself. Can you bypass the sensors without triggering them? Possibly, but they've established overlapping fields. Neutralizing one might alert the others to system tampering. While Torres analyzes the security system, Maya's chemical sensor suddenly issues a soft alert tone. TX-21 concentration just jumped to yellow warning level, she reports. Something ahead is actively releasing the compound. Jack checks his own sensor, confirming her reading. Deliberate or containment failure? Hard to determine without direct observation, but the sudden increase suggests active release rather than gradual seepage. Torres completes her analysis of the sensor array. I can create a blind corridor through their detection grid, but it will only last approximately 30 seconds before the system identifies the anomaly and initiates countermeasures. Distance to clear? Jack asks. 20 meters at minimum. We'll need to move quickly once I activate the bypass. Jack assesses the situation. The increasing chemical concentration suggests they're approaching a significant TX-21 source, potentially a production facility or storage area. The sophisticated defensive measures indicate high-value assets ahead. Proceeding carries substantial risk, but retreating means losing critical intelligence on the operation's scale and purpose. Prepare bypass sequence. On my mark, we move in tactical formation. 5-meter spacing, maintain momentum through the sensor corridor. Once clear, immediate defensive positioning, while Torres confirms no pursuit triggers activated. The team readies themselves, checking equipment and confirming communication systems. Torres connects specialized electronic countermeasure devices to the sensor network, preparing to create a temporary blind spot in the detection grid. Bypass active in 3, 2, 1, mark. The team moves with practiced precision, maintaining exact spacing while advancing at maximum safe speed through the compromised section. Jack leads, followed by 2 tactical specialists, then Maya with Dr. Nazari and Torres covering their rear as she monitors the bypass effectiveness. They clear the sensor-covered section without apparent detection, establishing security positions immediately beyond. Torres confirms the system hasn't triggered visible alerts, though they can't be certain of silent notifications to monitoring stations deeper in the network. Beyond the defensive position, the tunnel character changes dramatically. The rough-hewn passages give way to a constructed corridor with smooth concrete walls, recessed lighting, and what appears to be a pressurized door approximately 50 meters ahead. This is advanced infrastructure, Cutter observes through their communication link, more like a research facility than a smuggling tunnel. Maya's chemical sensor steadily increases toward orange warning level as they approach the sealed door. Significant concentration behind that barrier, consistent with either storage or production facilities. Jack examines the door without approaching too closely. Heavy steel construction with electronic access controls and what appears to be an airlock system for maintaining pressure differential, typical of containment facilities designed to prevent chemical release. No conventional breaching, he decides. The pressure differential could release concentrated TX-21 if we compromise the door integrity. Torres studies the electronic access panel. I might be able to bypass the security, but it will take time, and any entry attempt will likely alert monitoring systems. As they consider approach options, Maya's attention is drawn to something else, a symbol etched into the metal doorframe. Not the scorpion emblem they expected, but a corporate logo partially obscured by dirt and discoloration. She wipes the surface clean, revealing a familiar insignia. That's impossible. You recognize it? Jack asks. It's Nexus Biotherapeutics, Maya replies, her voice tight with disbelief. A pharmaceutical research corporation that partnered with DARPA on the original TX-21 development. They provided specialized equipment for our laboratory work. The revelation adds a disturbing dimension to their discovery. Not just cartel operations with sophisticated engineering, but potential corporate involvement with access to the original research. Could they be legitimate suppliers without knowing the end use? Torres suggests. This equipment is custom designed for chemical weapons production, Maya responds, examining markings on nearby control panels. There are strict international protocols for tracking and monitoring these systems precisely because of their dual-use potential. Nexus would need to report any sales or transfers to regulatory authorities. Jack processes this new information. So either Nexus is complicit or their equipment was stolen and repurposed. Neither explanation is reassuring, Maya replies grimly. This represents significant expansion of capabilities beyond what cartels typically access. Their discussion is interrupted as the chemical sensors simultaneously escalate to orange warning level. The TX-21 concentration is increasing despite the sealed door, suggesting either a leak in the containment system or deliberate venting into the approach. Corridor. They know we're here, Jack concludes. They're releasing compound to force our withdrawal. The team dons supplemental respiratory protection, activating secondary filtration systems in their protective gear. The suits will provide approximately 15 minutes of protection at current concentration levels before breakthrough occurs. Torres, how quickly can you bypass that access control? 8 minutes minimum without triggering security protocols. We don't have 8 minutes, Jack decides. Fall back to defensive position Alpha. We'll return with specialized breaching equipment after consulting with Ghost on structural implications. As the team begins tactical withdrawal, a new development freezes them in position. The electronic access panel on the sealed door suddenly activates, lights changing from red to green. Hydraulic systems engage as the heavy door begins to unlock. From the inside, defensive positions, Jack orders immediately. Prepare for hostile contact. The team takes cover using minimal available concealment, weapons trained on the slowly opening door. The TX-21 concentration spikes dangerously as the pressure differential equalizes. The orange warning on their sensors dangerously close to red evacuation threshold. As the door completes its opening cycle, a single figure emerges from the swirling chemical mist beyond. Dressed in full protective gear similar to their own, but bearing the Nexus Biotherapeutics logo, the individual raises empty hands in a universal gesture of surrender. Commander Reeves, a male voice calls through external speakers. I've been expecting you, though I admit you've arrived ahead of schedule. The familiarity of the voice sends a chill through Jack despite his protective gear. Though distorted by the communication system, there's no mistaking the distinctive cadence and accent of Alejandro Fuentes, the man who once saved him in Kandahar, now apparently orchestrating a chemical weapons operation beneath the border. I believe we have mutual interests to discuss. Fuentes continues conversationally, as if they've encountered each other at a professional conference, rather than hundreds of feet underground in a clandestine facility. Particularly regarding Dr. Reeves's excellent work on Compound TX-21 and its potential applications beyond the battlefield. The deliberate reference to Maya by name confirms Jack's suspicion. This operation has connections far beyond typical cartel activities, reaching into classified research and possibly corporate or governmental complicity. You have approximately 12 minutes before your protective equipment fails, Fuentes adds, consulting something on his wrist display. I suggest we use that time efficiently. Please join me inside where we can speak without the distraction of imminent chemical exposure. It's clearly a trap, yet the alternative is retreating without critical intelligence on the operation's scope and purpose. The team's sensors now hover just below red evacuation threshold, their survival window shrinking with each passing minute. Jack makes his decision based on tactical necessity rather than trust. Maintain defensive formation. We advance together, no separation. As they approach the open doorway, Fuentes steps back into the facility beyond, allowing them to enter what appears to be a decontamination chamber, the first barrier of what must be a much larger complex buried beneath the border, its purpose still shrouded in mystery, but its implications growing more disturbing with each discovery. The decontamination chamber hisses as automated systems activate. Chemical sprays, descending from sealing nozzles to neutralize contaminants on their protective suits. Jack maintains tactical positioning, his team forming a defensive semicircle with weapons trained on Fuentes, despite his seemingly cooperative demeanor. Standard precautionary measures, Fuentes explains through his suit's external speakers. The compound requires proper containment protocols. You'll find your chemical sensors returning to safe levels as the neutralizing agents take effect. True to his word, the warning indicators on their suits gradually shift from orange back to yellow, then green as the decontamination sequence completes. A second door at the chamber's far end unlocks with a pneumatic sigh. If you'll follow me, Fuentes continues, we can speak more comfortably in the conference room. You may maintain your protective gear if it provides psychological reassurance, though the air is quite safe in the secured sections. We'll keep our equipment in place, Jack responds flatly. Lead the way, but understand that any suspicious movement will be treated as hostile action. Fuentes shrugs, the gesture oddly casual given the circumstances. As you wish, though I had hoped for more trust from the man whose life I saved in Kandahar. The reference hangs between them as Fuentes leads them through the second doorway into a corridor that defies all expectations of what might exist beneath the Sonoran Desert. Clean white walls with recessed lighting, polished concrete floors, and clearly marked safety protocols posted at regular intervals. The environment resembles a pharmaceutical research facility more than a cartel operation. Welcome to Project Lazarus, Fuentes announces with evident pride, the most advanced pharmaceutical production facility in North America, though admittedly not one that appears on official registries. The team moves through the corridor in tight formation, documenting everything through helmet cameras while maintaining tactical readiness. Through doorways on either side, they glimpse sophisticated laboratory equipment, production machinery, and what appears to be climate-controlled storage units. You're manufacturing TX-21, Maya states, her scientific interest momentarily overriding tactical concerns. A modified version, yes, Fuentes confirms. Your original formula was brilliant, but limited in practical application. We've enhanced environmental persistence and absorption efficiency while reducing production costs by approximately 60%. For what purpose? Jack demands. Fuentes leads them into what appears to be a conference room, a surreal touch of corporate normalcy in a clandestine underground facility. Wall-mounted screens display molecular structures, production schedules, and distribution maps covering both sides of the border. Please secure the room as your protocols require, Fuentes offers, taking a seat at the head of the conference table. I understand the tactical necessities. Torres and two team members immediately perform a security sweep, checking for hidden threats or surveillance, while Jack keeps his attention fixed on Fuentes. The man has changed since Afghanistan, his once military trim appearance now softened by prosperity, though his eyes retain the calculating intelligence that had once devised their rescue from a collapsed tunnel halfway around the world. The room is secure, Torres reports. No immediate threats detected, though there are cameras in the ceiling corners. Standard security monitoring, Fuentes explains. Though I've temporarily disabled the feeds for our conversation, Jack remains, standing, unwilling to surrender the psychological advantage of height. You've built an illegal chemical weapons facility beneath the US-Mexico border, utilizing stolen research to manufacture a compound designed for military applications. I need an explanation that doesn't end with you in a black site prison for the rest of your life. Fuentes smiles thinly. Always direct, Commander. It's what I respected about you in Afghanistan. He gestures to the screens surrounding them. What you see isn't a weapons program. It's a pharmaceutical revolution being developed outside conventional channels due to regulatory obstruction and corporate territoriality. TX-21 is a controlled compound developed for military use. Maya interjects. Its production or possession without authorization violates multiple international conventions. Because its potential was artificially constrained, Fuentes counters. Your research team discovered something extraordinary. A compound that could selectively modulate neural pathways without the addictive properties of conventional opioids. A true solution to chronic pain that the pharmaceutical industry deliberately shelved because it threatened their profitable addiction cycles. The accusation hangs in the air as Fuentes activates one of the wall screens displaying clinical data. We've refined your work, Dr. Reeves. The version we've developed can be administered in microdoses through conventional delivery methods, pills, patches, injections, providing pain relief without respiratory depression, addiction potential, or cognitive impairment. If your intentions are medical, why the clandestine facility? Jack challenges. Why the tunnel network extending beneath critical infrastructure? Fuentes' expression hardens slightly. Because powerful interests would destroy this research, rather than allow it to reach market. The same pharmaceutical conglomerates that buried your original work, Dr. Reeves. The tunnels provide security and discrete distribution channels beyond their reach. Maya studies the molecular structures displayed on the screen, her scientific training allowing her to evaluate Fuentes' claims. These modifications preserve the core neural modulating properties while reducing binding affinity to respiratory receptors, she acknowledges. Theoretically, that could create a non-addictive pain management compound. Not theoretically, Fuentes corrects. We've conducted clinical trials with terminal patients in Mexico who had no other options. The results were remarkable. Complete pain relief without the side effects that make traditional opioids so problematic. Jack remains skeptical, and the defensive measures throughout the tunnel network, the surveillance equipment, the tactical positioning beneath water treatment facilities and power distribution nodes, those don't align with legitimate pharmaceutical research. Necessary precautions. Fuentes responds smoothly. We've invested over $300 million in this facility. Multiple entities would benefit from its destruction. Competing cartels, pharmaceutical corporations, government agencies protecting their monopoly on pain management. You expect us to believe El Alacran, who built his reputation on brutal cartel enforcement, has transformed into a humanitarian pharmaceutical developer? Torres asks incredulously. Fuentes' expression reveals a flash of genuine anger before settling back into calculated composure. People evolve, Agent Torres. After Kandahar, I returned to Mexico with a different perspective. I saw how my engineering skills could build rather than destroy. By partnering with cartels, Jack challenges, by utilizing available resources and distribution networks. Fuentes corrects. The cartels provided initial financing and protection, true, but our objectives have diverged significantly in recent years. This facility operates independently now, with its own security and infrastructure. Maya approaches one of the screens, examining the clinical data more closely. These trial results show remarkable efficacy, but the methodology lacks standard controls and transparency. How can we verify these outcomes weren't manipulated? You're welcome to review our complete research database, Fuentes offers, including raw patient data, treatment protocols, and long-term follow-up studies. We have nothing to hide regarding the compound's efficacy or safety profile. Jack intercepts a silent communication from Torres, a subtle hand signal indicating She's identified something concerning about the facility layout displayed on another screen. Following her gaze, he notices what triggered her alert. The underground complex extends well beyond what they've seen, with sections clearly marked for purposes unrelated to pharmaceutical production. If your operation is legitimate pharmaceutical research, Jack presses, explain the tunnels extending beneath critical infrastructure throughout the region. Your network reaches water treatment facilities, power distribution nodes, and communications hubs, strategic positions for someone planning to hold communities hostage. Fuentes sighs, as if disappointed by Jack's persistent suspicion. The tunnel network serves multiple purposes. Primary is secure transportation of materials and personnel without surface detection. Secondary is geological stability. We followed natural formations that provide structural integrity for a facility of this scale. The proximity to infrastructure is coincidental to those requirements. And the mechanical surveillance snakes, the military-grade defensive measures? Jack persists. Protection against intrusion, primarily from rival cartels who would gladly appropriate our research and production capabilities. Fuentes spreads his hands in a gesture of apparent transparency. Commander, if I intended harm to border communities, I could have deployed TX-21 through water systems months ago. Instead, we focused entirely on refining it for legitimate medical applications. Maya has been systematically examining the research data displayed on various screens, her scientific expertise allowing assessments the others cannot make. The compound modifications are sophisticated, she acknowledges. They preserve therapeutic properties while reducing side effects. But the application methodology focuses exclusively on controlled medical delivery, not environmental dispersion. Exactly, Fuentes seizes on her observation. We've eliminated the warfare applications your original project envisioned, Dr. Reeves. This is medicine, not a weapon. Jack exchanges glances with Torres, both recognizing the skilled manipulation Fuentes employs, mixing verifiable truths with carefully constructed narratives to justify actions that remain deeply suspicious. If your intentions are legitimate, Jack challenges, why not approach regulatory authorities with your research? Apply for proper clinical trials and approval processes, Fuentes laughs, the sound sharp and genuine. You know better than that, Commander. The pharmaceutical industry spends billions annually ensuring regulatory capture. They've created a system where developing new medications costs so much that only they can afford the process, allowing them to maintain monopolies on treating chronic conditions. He stands, moving to a wall display showing financial projections. Current pain management medications generate approximately $25 billion annually for pharmaceutical corporations. Most are addictive by design, creating lifetime customers through dependency. Our compound threatens that revenue stream entirely. Do you honestly believe they would allow conventional approval? The argument isn't without merit, Jack acknowledges. Privately, the opioid crisis had revealed how thoroughly major pharmaceutical companies had corrupted medical practice and regulatory oversight in pursuit of profit, regardless of human cost. Even if we accept your justification, Torres interjects, your methods remain illegal and dangerous. This facility violates dozens of laws and international agreements. Sometimes progress requires operating outside broken systems, Fuentes replies unapologetically. The history of medicine is filled with researchers who defied convention to save lives. Throughout their exchange, Jack has been systematically evaluating escape routes, defensive positions, and tactical vulnerabilities. Despite Fuentes' apparently reasonable demeanor, the situation remains extremely dangerous. They're deep underground in a facility with unknown security measures, confronting a man known for strategic brilliance and ruthless execution. You've presented an interesting narrative, Jack acknowledges, but it doesn't explain everything we've observed. The mechanical surveillance devices, the positioning beneath critical infrastructure, the military-grade defensive measures throughout, the tunnel network, insurance policies. Fuentes admits, we operate outside conventional protection frameworks, making us vulnerable to multiple threats, including your own government agencies, which might prefer to destroy our research rather than allow it to disrupt profitable pharmaceutical monopolies. He activates another screen, displaying security footage of the tunnel network. We monitor all approaches to protect our investment and research. The defensive measures are designed to deter intrusion without unnecessary casualties, unlike the cartels I previously worked with. I prefer not to leave bodies in my wake. The implied contrast to his former employers might be genuine, Jack acknowledges silently. Fuentes had always been considered unusually restrained for a cartel enforcer, which had made him all the more effective in his role. What exactly are you proposing here? Jack asks directly. You must have anticipated our eventual discovery of this facility. A collaborative arrangement, Fuentes replies without hesitation. Your team has resources and protection capabilities we lack. We have developed a compound that could end the opioid crisis and transform pain management globally. Together, we could navigate the regulatory barriers and corporate opposition that would otherwise prevent this medication from reaching those who need it. The proposal hangs in the air, its audacity momentarily silencing even Torres, who typically has an immediate tactical response for every situation. You're suggesting a joint operation between a clandestine border security unit and an illegal pharmaceutical operation run by a former cartel enforcer, Jack summarizes incredulously. I'm suggesting a pragmatic alliance between individuals who understand that sometimes systems must be circumvented to achieve greater good, Fuentes corrects. Your own career demonstrates similar pragmatism, Commander. The reference to Jack's operational history, including numerous instances where he had bent or broken rules to achieve mission objectives, is clearly calculated to establish common ground. It's manipulative, but not entirely inaccurate. Maya has been systematically examining the research data displayed throughout the conference room, her scientific expertise allowing her to evaluate Fuentes' claims more thoroughly than the others. The molecular modifications are consistent with legitimate pharmaceutical development, she acknowledges reluctantly. They've maintained therapeutic efficacy while eliminating the characteristics that made the original compound suitable for weaponization. Because weaponization was never our objective, Fuentes emphasizes. We seek to heal, not harm. Jack studies Fuentes carefully, searching for the tells that would indicate deception. The man's presentation is compelling, supported by verifiable research data and logical argumentation. Yet something remains off, a discordant note in an otherwise harmonious explanation. If pharmaceutical development is your primary objective, Jack challenges, explain the tunnels extending toward population centers. Your network reaches far beyond what's necessary for secure transportation or geological stability. Fuentes hesitates for the first time, a momentary calculation visible in his eyes. The extended network serves contingency purposes, he admits, insurance against potential interdiction by authorities or rival organizations. Meaning. Torres. Presses. Meaning we've created distribution infrastructure that can't be easily disrupted, Fuentes explains. If conventional channels are blocked, either by competitors or governmental agencies, we maintain alternative routes to deliver our medication to those who need it. The explanation is plausible, but incomplete. Jack senses something significant. Remains unsaid, a deeper purpose to the elaborate tunnel network extending beneath critical infrastructure on both sides of the border. I need to consult with my team, Jack decides. Your proposal requires careful consideration. Of course, Fuentes agrees readily, though I should mention that our security protocols include automatic alert systems. Your surface team has likely already noticed communication delays resulting from signal attenuation through our containment measures. They may be preparing extraction operations that could damage this facility. The observation carries an implied threat despite its conversational delivery. Jack recognizes the tactical situation clearly. They're deep underground in a facility, controlled by Fuentes, with unknown security measures and potential reinforcements at his disposal. Pushing too hard could transform this unexpected negotiation into a hostage situation. I'll contact our surface team to stand down emergency protocols, Jack offers, while we continue our discussion. Fuentes smiles, evidently pleased by the diplomatic response. An excellent suggestion. You'll find communication equipment in the adjacent control room. Your team is welcome to inspect it for tampering before use. As Torres and two tactical specialists move to evaluate the communication system, Jack positions himself where he can monitor both Fuentes and the doorway. Maya continues examining the research data, her scientific curiosity apparently overriding security concerns. Your modifications to the delivery mechanism are particularly interesting, she comments, studying molecular diagrams. You've enhanced bioavailability while reducing potential for misuse. Precisely, Fuentes confirms, seemingly grateful for her scientific recognition. The compound can only be activated through specific enzymatic pathways, making it virtually impossible to extract and repurpose for recreational use. Their technical discussion continues, while Jack maintains situational awareness, noting staff members visible through doorways and windows, all wearing Nexus biotherapeutics attire rather than Cartel identifiers. The facility appears to function as a legitimate research operation despite its illegal status and location. Torres returns from the communications room, her expression carefully neutral. The equipment appears genuine. Surface team reports all secure, though they were preparing extraction protocols due to our delayed check-in. Jack nods acknowledgement, then addresses Fuentes directly. We'll need time to verify your claims and evaluate your proposal. That requires samples of your compound, complete research documentation, and facility schematics. Reasonable requests, Fuentes agrees readily. Though I must insist on certain security provisions. The samples must remain under joint control at all times. The documentation includes proprietary methodologies that require confidentiality agreements. And the facility schematics will be limited to research and production areas, excluding security, systems, and certain specialized sections. The qualifications are predictable but concerning. Jack particularly notes the reference to specialized sections. excluded from the schematics, likely including whatever Torres identified in the facility layouts earlier. Those terms are acceptable for preliminary evaluation, Jack responds, maintaining the facade of potential cooperation while planning more thorough investigation once they're safely back at their command center. We'll need to establish a secure communication protocol for ongoing discussions. Fuentes appears satisfied with this development, though his calculated smile suggests he recognizes the tactical positioning beneath Jack's apparent cooperation. Their confrontation has transformed into a complex chess match, each side making measured moves while evaluating the opponent's true intentions. As they finalize arrangements for sample transfer and documentation exchange, Jack maintains heightened awareness of their surroundings, particularly the movements of facility personnel, visible through glass partitions. Despite Fuentes' compelling narrative and Maya's preliminary validation of the research, something about the operation doesn't align with its presented purpose. A disconnection Jack intends to identify once they've secured what intelligence they can and extract it safely to the surface. The situation has evolved far beyond a standard border security operation into something with potential national implications. If Fuentes' claims prove true, they've discovered a pharmaceutical breakthrough being developed outside regulatory frameworks. If false, they've uncovered an elaborate deception concealing darker purposes for the tunnel network and chemical production. Either possibility requires careful handling and thorough investigation beyond what they can accomplish in their current vulnerable position. Jack schedules a follow-up meeting for 48 hours later, providing time for preliminary analysis, while maintaining engagement with Fuentes' operation. As they prepare to depart with carefully packaged samples and encrypted research documentation, he can't shake the sense that they've only scratched the surface of what lies beneath the border, literal and figurative depths still concealing secrets that may prove more dangerous than anything they've discovered thus far. Jack's team returns to the surface, carrying the samples and encrypted documentation provided by Fuentes. The desert night has fallen, stars impossibly bright overhead as they emerge from the tunnel system. Despite the successful extraction, tension remains high. Something about Fuentes' explanation doesn't add up. At the command center, Maya immediately begins analyzing the compound samples while Finn works to decrypt the research documentation. The rest of the team gathers around the tactical table where Jack outlines his suspicions. Fuentes presented a compelling narrative, but there are significant inconsistencies, Jack explains, bringing up the tunnel schematic. The network extends far beyond what's needed for a pharmaceutical operation, deliberately positioned beneath critical infrastructure. And those specialized sections he refused to include in the schematics, Torres adds. They occupied nearly 40% of the facility footprint. Ghost manipulates the tunnel mapping display. Based on thermal and structural analysis, those areas appear to house extensive power systems and what might be large-scale storage facilities, inconsistent with pharmaceutical production requirements. 3 hours into their analysis, Maya emerges from the mobile laboratory, her expression grim. The samples contain legitimate pain management compounds, as Fuentes claimed, she confirms. But they're designed with a critical vulnerability, a chemical trigger that could transform them from therapeutic to toxic when exposed to specific activating agents. A fail-safe, Jack realizes. medication that could become a weapon if needed. Finn's decryption efforts reveal even more disturbing findings. Communications between Fuentes and several major pharmaceutical executives, along with what appear to be offshore financial transactions involving shell companies linked to both cartels and legitimate corporations. This goes beyond border security, Torres concludes. Corporate involvement, potential weaponization, strategic positioning beneath critical infrastructure. We're looking at a complex extortion scheme. As they piece together the true nature of the operation, an alert sounds from the perimeter sensors. Multiple vehicles approaching from the south, moving at high speed without lights. Defensive positions, Jack orders immediately. Ghost, prepare. Emergency demolition protocols for the tunnel entrance. The team deploys with practiced efficiency, taking covered positions as surveillance drones identify the approaching threat. 3 tactical vehicles carrying heavily armed personnel, their equipment indicating cartel enforcement units rather. Then Fuentes' security team. Rival organization, Cutter assesses through his rifle scope. La Linea markings. They must have detected our operation and tracked us to the tunnel entrance. The implications are clear. If rival cartels gain access to the tunnel network and Fuentes' research, the consequences could be catastrophic. The weaponized pharmaceutical compounds could be deployed against civilian populations, while the strategic tunnel positioning could be used for mass infiltration rather than medical distribution. We hold this position, Jack decides. No one enters that tunnel system. What follows is 15 minutes of intense firefight as the rival cartel forces attempt to breach their perimeter. The Border Tactical Response Team's superior training and defensive positioning ultimately prevail, forcing the attackers to retreat with heavy casualties. In the aftermath, Jack receives an encrypted message from Fuentes. You've seen the competition. Imagine what happens if they acquire our research. Reconsider my proposal. The message confirms Jack's suspicions. Fuentes had anticipated the attack, possibly even orchestrated it to demonstrate the threat posed by rival organizations and strengthen his negotiating position. Dawn breaks over the desert as national security officials arrive via helicopter. The situation has escalated beyond border tactical response jurisdiction, now involving DEA, FBI, and military intelligence components. Jack briefs the assembled directors on their discoveries and Fuentes' proposal. So we have a sophisticated pharmaceutical operation run by a former cartel engineer developing medications that could revolutionize pain management or be weaponized for mass casualty incidents, the FBI director summarizes. All delivered through an underground network strategically positioned beneath critical infrastructure on both sides of the border. With apparent corporate complicity and financial connections to legitimate pharmaceutical companies, Jack adds. This isn't just cartel activity, it's a complex operation with tentacles reaching into legitimate industries and possibly governmental agencies. The intelligence director studies the facility schematics. Those restricted areas concern me most. Thermal signatures suggest capabilities beyond pharmaceutical production. Maya, who has continued analyzing the samples through the night, joins the briefing with new findings. The triggering mechanism I identified can be activated through common water treatment chemicals. If these compounds were introduced into municipal water supplies, they could be remotely transformed from beneficial to toxic with a single catalytic agent. The revelation crystallizes the true nature of Fuentes' operation, not merely pharmaceutical production outside regulatory frameworks, but the development of a sophisticated chemical leverage system, distribute beneficial medication through underground channels, build dependency in vulnerable populations, then threaten transformation to toxic compounds if demands aren't met. The ultimate extortion scheme, Jack concludes, positioned to affect millions of people on both sides of the border. A joint operation is authorized immediately. Simultaneous raids on Fuentes' facility and identified corporate partners coordinated with Mexican authorities to target cartel connections. Jack's team will lead the underground assault due to their familiarity with the tunnel system and facility layout. As they prepare for insertion, Maya approaches Jack privately. There's something else you should know. The research documentation included clinical trials dating back 3 years, involving military veterans with chronic pain from combat injuries. Jack feels a chill despite the desert heat. Unauthorized human testing? The results were remarkable. Complete pain relief without side effects or dependency. But the subjects' identities were concealed using numerical designators. She hesitates, then shows him one file she's managed to partially decrypt. The patient history describes injuries consistent with those Jack sustained in Afghanistan, including specific details of his near-death experience in the collapsed tunnel. He's been testing it on you, Jack. Monthly injections disguised as standard. Pain management at the VA clinic, your patient zero in his clinical trials. The revelation lands like a physical blow. Jack has been receiving treatment for chronic pain from his combat injuries for years, standard protocol for veterans with his service record. The possibility that Fuentes had infiltrated the VA system to test compounds on him without consent explains the former cartel engineer's confidence in the medication's efficacy. This is personal, Jack realizes. He saved my life in Kandahar, then used me as an unwitting test subject. Why? The documentation suggests he selected subjects with specific neurological profiles, people who had experienced traumatic brain injuries or oxygen deprivation. Your tunnel collapse experience made you an ideal candidate. The operation timeline accelerates as intelligence indicates Fuentes is preparing to evacuate the facility. The team inserts through their original entry point, advancing rapidly toward the main production area using Ghost's structural analysis to bypass defensive measures. They encounter minimal resistance, clear evidence that Fuentes anticipated their return and has initiated facility shutdown protocols. When they reach the main laboratory complex, they find equipment being systematically destroyed, data drives removed, and production materials loaded for transport. Jack leads the assault team through the facility's restricted sections, finally discovering what Fuentes had concealed during their initial visit. Massive distribution infrastructure connected directly to municipal water systems on both sides of the border, capable of introducing compounds into the water supply. For millions of people, deep in the facility's most secure area, they find Fuentes calmly waiting in a control room, monitoring evacuation progress on multiple screens. Unlike their previous encounter, he's not wearing protective gear, just casual business attire, as if attending a corporate meeting rather than a raid. "You should have accepted my proposal, Commander," he says without turning. "We could have transformed pain management together, helped millions of veterans like yourself. By testing experimental compounds on unwitting subjects," Jack challenges. "By building infrastructure to hold entire communities hostage. Fuentes finally turns, his expression surprisingly regretful. Insurance policies, nothing more. The world doesn't allow innovation without power behind it. As tactical teams secure the facility and begin cataloging evidence, Fuentes offers no resistance. His operation has clearly achieved sufficient progress that physical infrastructure has become secondary. The research, formulations, and methodology already transferred to backup locations. This isn't over, Fuentes tells Jack as he's led away. The system that forces such measures remains intact. Pharmaceutical companies will continue creating addicts instead of cures. Veterans like you will continue suffering needlessly. In the aftermath, the full scope of the operation becomes clear. A sophisticated enterprise spanning both sides of the border, involving corporate partners, cartel infrastructure, and compromised medical facilities. The tunnel network extended beneath 12 critical infrastructure nodes, positioning Fuentes to potentially control water, power, and communications for communities across the Southwest. 3 weeks later, Jack sits in a secure military medical facility, watching as Meyer explains test results from his blood work. The compounds Fuentes had tested on him without consent had integrated with his neurological system, providing effective pain relief while creating specific biochemical markers that made him vulnerable to the triggered toxicity. We can neutralize the compounds, Meyer explains, remove the vulnerability completely, but I'll lose the pain relief benefits, Jack finishes for her. The irony isn't lost on him. Fuentes' unethical testing had actually delivered the one thing legitimate medicine had failed to provide: effective management of his chronic pain without cognitively debilitating side effects. The discovery of the tunnel network and pharmaceutical operation leads to international investigations involving multiple corporations and government officials. Evidence suggests systematic suppression of pain management research that threatened profitable opioid markets, exactly as Fuentes had claimed. Jack's team receives commendations for uncovering the operation, though the full extent remains classified to prevent panic about infrastructure vulnerabilities. The tunnels are systematically mapped and destroyed, their strategic positioning beneath critical systems prompting comprehensive security reassessments along the entire border. Fuentes himself disappears during transport to a federal detention facility, an accident that suggests powerful interests preferred his silence. The research continues circulating through underground channels, however, offering tantalizing possibilities of pain relief without addiction alongside devastating potential for weaponization. For Jack, the legacy of the operation remains deeply personal. The knowledge that his former rescuer had used him as an unwitting test subject, yet in doing so, had actually delivered effective treatment for his chronic pain. The ethical contradictions mirror the complexity of the border itself, a line drawn across sand that cannot truly separate the intertwined fates of communities on both sides. As his team deploys to investigate reports of new tunnel activity, 50 miles west, Jack reflects on Fuentes' final words to him. "Borders are illusions, Commander. What flows beneath them, water, chemicals, pain, hope, these are the realities that truly govern our lives." The desert stretches before them, its surface unchanged, while beneath it, unknown depths continue to hold secrets waiting to be discovered by those who dare to dig beneath the surface of comfortable illusions into the harsh realities flowing beneath. If you found this story of cartel tunnels and former Navy SEALs battling beneath the border intriguing, make sure to hit that subscribe button to stay updated on our future content. We're constantly exploring the hidden stories that shape our world, from covert operations to the complex realities of border security. Leave a comment below with your thoughts, and don't forget to share this video with anyone who appreciates stories that dig beneath the surface. Thanks for watching.